I walked into my surprise birthday dinner and saw the cake was already half eaten. My family laughed like it was a sitcom while my sister filmed, waiting for me to explode, but I did not scream. I just leaned down and whispered one sentence to my uncle that made his face go white. That cake was not the only thing sliced out of my life. They had stolen something much more valuable, assuming I would never find out. My name is Aurora Mitchell. I am 29 years old, and if you looked at my tax returns, you would tell me to get a real job. If you looked at my bank account, you would probably offer to buy me a sandwich. But if you looked at my face, specifically right now, as I stared at the peeling beige paint of my ceiling in East Briar, you would see someone who had mastered the art of holding her breath. I am a freelance graphic designer. That is the title I put on LinkedIn. It is the title I used to justify the 4 years of college debt that followed me around like a hungry ghost. In reality, being a freelance designer in a town like East Briar meant I was a professional chaser of invoices. It meant I spent my mornings drinking cheap instant coffee and my afternoons refreshing my inbox, praying that the local bakery would finally pay me the $300 they owed me for a logo redesign. I finished 2 months ago. It meant my life was a series of calculations performed in the grocery store aisle. Could I afford the good cheese? No. Could I afford the brand name pasta? Maybe. If I skipped coffee next week. My apartment was a testament to this delicate balance. It was a studio, which is real estate code for a shoebox with a window. My desk was crammed against the wall where the draft from the window was strongest, meaning I usually worked wrapped in a blanket like a tech-savvy burrito. It was not the life I had pictured when I was 18, packing my bags with stars in my eyes, but it was mine. It was quiet. It was safe. Until the phone buzzed, it was vibrating against the hard wood of my desk. A jarring sound that made me jump. I knew who it was before I even looked. It was 5 o'clock on a Friday, the witching hour for family obligations. I picked it up. The screen illuminated the dim room. It was a text from Holly. Mom is doing a birthday thing for you. Don't worry. Just come. I'll run interference. My stomach dropped. It was not a flutter. It was a heavy, leaden thud, like dropping a stone down a well. Holly was my cousin, the daughter of my mother's sister, and the only person in my entire bloodline who did not make me want to drive my car into a lake. She was the peacekeeper, the spy behind enemy lines. If Holly was warning me, it meant the trap was already set. I typed back, my fingers hovering over the glass. I thought we agreed to skip it this year. I told her I was busy. 3 dots bubbled up, then vanished, then bubbled up again. You know Aunt Diane. She says 29 is the last good year before you turn into a pumpkin. Just come. Copper Ash. 7. Copper Ash. Of course. It had to be Copper Ash. It was the trendiest spot in Wellington Ridge, a place where they served burgers on slate tiles instead of plates and charged $25 for the privilege. It was loud. It was pretentious. And it was exactly the kind of place my mother chose when she wanted to be seen being a good mother, rather than actually being one. I sat there for a long time, the light from the screen fading to black. I could say no. I was an adult. I paid my own rent. Mostly. I could just turn the phone off, lock the door, and spend my birthday eating ramen and watching old movies. But I wouldn't. We both knew I wouldn't. Because there was Sloane. Sloane was my sister. She was 25, 4 years younger than me, and she was the sun around which our family orbited. Sloane had a salary. Sloane had a benefits package with dental. Sloane had a fiancé named Mark, who wore boat shoes and had a firm handshake. Sloane was the golden child, the one who did everything right, the one whose existence seemed specifically calibrated to highlight exactly where I had gone wrong. If I didn't go, the narrative would be written without me. Aurora is being difficult again. Aurora is so ungrateful. We tried to do something nice for her, and she snubbed us. I would be the villain of the dinner conversation, and I wouldn't even be there to defend myself. I stood up, my knees cracking. Just one meal, I whispered to the empty room. Just smile, just survive. Getting ready was a strategic operation. I had to look successful enough to avoid pity, but humble enough to not look like I was trying too hard. I chose a black blazer I had found at a thrift store. It was structured, professional, and hid the fact that the blouse underneath had a small stain near the hem. I put on lipstick, a shade of red that felt like war paint. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired. There were shadows there that concealer couldn't quite hide. The shadows of late nights working on projects that paid pennies. The shadows of stress, of loneliness. Happy birthday, Aurora, I told my reflection. The woman in the mirror did not smile back. I left the apartment and walked down the 3 flights of stairs to the parking lot. My car was a 10-year-old sedan that sounded like it had a chronic cough. I patted the dashboard as I turned the key, praying it would start on the first try. It did, with a reluctant shudder. The drive from East Briar to Wellington Ridge was a journey between two different worlds. East Briar was gray, industrial, a place of flat roofs and chain-link fences. But as I drove west, the landscape shifted, the roads smoothed out, the streetlights changed from harsh sodium orange to a soft, inviting white. The lawns expanded, manicured into shades of green that looked unnatural under the evening sky. Wellington Ridge was where people lived when they had made it. It was where my parents lived. It was where the air smelled like mulch and money. I gripped the steering wheel tight, my knuckles turning white. My heart was doing a nervous tap dance against my ribs. It wasn't just anxiety. It was a conditioned response, a Pavlovian reaction to the proximity of my family. For years, every interaction with them had been a performance review I was destined to fail. Why are you still freelancing? Why don't you get a corporate job like Sloan? When are you going to settle down? The questions were never really questions. They were accusations. They were ways of saying, "You are not what we ordered." I pulled into the parking lot of Copper Ash. It was packed. Ranges of expensive SUVs and luxury sedans filled the spaces. My beat-up car looked like a stray dog that had wandered into a purebred show. I parked in the back, far away from the entrance, partially to hide my vehicle and partially to give myself a few more minutes of silence. I checked my phone. 6:58, 2 minutes to 0 hour. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old upholstery and stale mints. "Just survive," I repeated. It was my mantra, my prayer. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool evening air. The restaurant loomed ahead, a monstrosity of reclaimed wood and exposed brick, glowing with warm, amber light. I could hear the hum of conversations spilling out onto the patio, the clinking of glasses, the laughter of people who didn't have to check their bank balance before ordering an appetizer. I walked to the entrance. The hostess was a girl who looked about 19, with perfect skin and an expression of vague boredom. "Reservation for Mitchell," I said. My voice sounded steady. "Good. Right this way," she chirped, grabbing a stack of menus. I followed her through the maze of tables. The restaurant was loud, an assault of noise. Industrial lighting hung low over the tables, casting long shadows. And then, I saw them. They were at a large round table near the back, elevated on a platform like royalty looking down on their subjects. My mother, Diane, sat at the head of the table. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse that looked like silk and probably cost more than my rent. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, a helmet of blonde highlights that did not move. She was scanning the room, her eyes darting back and forth, not looking for me, but looking to see who was looking at her. To her right was my father, Ray. He was studying the menu with an intensity that suggested he was trying to decode nuclear launch codes. He was a small man, or at least he had made himself small over the years. He was the background noise to my mother's melody, the beige paint on the walls of her life. He didn't look up as I approached. He never did. And then there was Uncle Graham, my mother's brother. He was a large man, taking up space in every sense of the word. He was leaning back in his chair, a glass of dark liquor in his hand. His face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He was talking, his voice booming over the ambient noise of the restaurant. "Problem with this generation is they don't know the value of $1, Graham was saying, gesturing with his glass, nearly splashing the person next to him. They want everything handed to them on a silver platter. Lazy. That's what it is." I froze for a second. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it, metallic and bitter. Uncle Graham, who had borrowed money from my grandfather until the day the old man died, lecturing the world on laziness. Next to him sat Sloan. She looked radiant. Of course she did. She was wearing a dress that fit her perfectly, her hair cascading over her shoulders in glossy waves. She was nodding at whatever Graham was saying, playing the role of the dutiful niece, but her eyes were on her phone. She was scrolling, probably checking her engagement metrics, and finally, Holly. She was sitting on the edge of the group, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. When she saw me, her eyes widened, and she gave me a tiny, tight smile. It was a lifeline. "I'm here," that smile said. "I'm sorry." I took a breath that filled my lungs with the scent of truffle oil and expensive perfume, and I stepped into the light. "Happy birthday to me," I muttered under my breath, and walked up to the table. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," Graham boomed, spotting me first. The conversation at the table stopped. All heads turned toward me. "Aurora," my mother said. She didn't stand up to hug me. She didn't smile with warmth. She smiled with assessment. Her eyes swept over me, starting from my thrifted boots, traveling up my black jeans, pausing on the stain-hiding blazer, and finally landing on my face. It was a scan, a quality control check. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said, forcing a cheerfulness I did not feel into my voice. "Sorry if I'm late. Traffic coming out of East Briar was a nightmare." "We know," Sloane said, her voice smooth and melodic. "It's always bad coming from that side of town." There it was, the first jab, that side of town, the side where people struggled, the side where I lived. My father looked up from his menu and gave me a nod. "Aurora," he said softly. "Happy birthday." "Thanks, Dad," I said. I pulled out the empty chair next to Holly. As I sat down, I felt the atmosphere shift. It wasn't a celebration, it was a tribunal. My mother leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. She clasped her hands together, her manicured nails clicking against each other. "You look tired, honey," she said. It sounded like concern, but I knew the frequency. It was criticism disguised as care. "Are you eating enough? You look a little thin." "I'm fine. Mom," I said, unfolding my napkin. "Just busy with work. Lots of projects right now." "Projects," Graham snorted into his drink. "That's what they call it now. Back in my day, we called it unemployment until you got a paycheck. I get paychecks. Uncle Graham," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have clients." Sure. He waved a hand dismissively. "Graphics and doodles. Very cute." I felt Holly's hand brush against my knee under the table. A silent comfort. "Don't engage." Her touch said, "Don't let him win." "Leave her alone, Graham," my mother said, though her tone lacked any real reprimand. She turned her gaze back to me, tilting her head slightly to the side. "Actually, Graham is wrong. You look better than last time. Today you look well. You look a little less unemployed than usual." The table went quiet for a beat. Less unemployed. The words hung in the air, suspended between the appetizers and the water glasses. It was a masterpiece of an insult. It acknowledged that I looked decent while simultaneously reinforcing the idea that my default state was failure. It invalidated my career, my efforts, and my existence in 5 words. Sloane let out a small giggle, quickly covering it with a cough. "Mom, you're terrible," she said. But she was smiling. She reached for her wine glass, the diamond on her finger catching the overhead light. I looked around the table. I looked at my father, who was suddenly very interested in the silverware. I looked at Graham, who was smirking. I looked at my mother, who was watching me with that serene, expectant look, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to get angry so she could call me sensitive, waiting for me to cry so she could call me unstable. And in that moment, the cold realization washed over me. It started at my toes and rose up to my throat, chilling me despite the heat of the restaurant. This wasn't a birthday dinner. There were no balloons. There were no presents stacked on the table. The vibe wasn't celebratory. It was performative. My mother hadn't organized this because she wanted to celebrate the 29 years I had been on this earth. She had organized this because she needed a stage. She needed to show the world, or at least the patrons of Copper Ash and her Facebook friends, how benevolent she was. Look at me, taking my struggling, wayward daughter out for a nice meal. Look at how I support her, even though she refuses to listen to my advice. I was not the guest of honor. I was the prop. I was the cautionary tale sitting next to the success story. I was there to make Sloane shine brighter by comparison. I was there to make my mother look like a saint for tolerating me. I was the before picture in their afterlife. "Thanks, Mom," I said. My voice was dry, brittle. "That means a lot. I'm just being honest." "Aurora," she said, picking up her menu. "Someone has to be. Now, let's order. I'm starving, and I'm paying. So order whatever you want. Don't look at the prices. I know you worry about that." She said it loud enough for the table next to us to hear. "I'm paying. She worries about prices." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Shame. It was a hot, sticky shame that I had done nothing to earn but was forced to wear anyway. "Just order," I told myself again, gripping the heavy cardstock of the menu. Just smile. Just survive. But as I looked at the list of $20 burgers and $15 cocktails, the numbers blurred. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was enduring, and I had the sinking feeling that the price of admission for this meal was going to be a lot higher than just my dignity. I didn't know it yet, But the real humiliation hadn't even started. The cake was still waiting in the kitchen. And with it, the secret that would tear this table apart. The appetizers arrived like a tactical distraction in a war zone. A tower of chilled seafood was placed in the center of the table, sweating condensation onto the dark wood. It was an obscene amount of food for 6 people, piled high with oysters, crab legs, and shrimp the size of a toddler's fist. My mother, Diane, gestured to the tower with the grace of a game show model. "I ordered the grande," she announced, her voice pitching up just enough to carry to the neighboring tables. "I figured we should celebrate properly. Put it on my card," she added to the waiter, who had not even asked. "The platinum one." She looked at me then. It was a fleeting glance, barely a second long, but it carried the weight of 1,000 lectures. "See," that look said. "This is what success looks like. This is what you cannot give yourself." I reached for a lemon wedge, my hand trembling slightly. "Thanks, Mom. You didn't have to." "Oh, nonsense," she waved me off. "It is your birthday. Besides, I know things are tight for you. When was the last time you had decent crab?" I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. "I eat fine, Mom." "Sure you do," Uncle Graham grunted. He had already claimed a lobster tail and was dismantling it with aggressive, wet sounds. "Ramen noodles and toast, right? That is the diet of the artist." "I am a designer," I corrected him, for what felt like the 100th time in my life. "I design user interfaces for mobile applications and websites. It is technical work." Graham laughed. It was a wet hacking sound that sprayed a fine mist of seafood juice into the air. "Right, computer drawing. My neighbor's kid does that. He is 12. I opened my mouth to explain the difference between a 12-year-old's Minecraft skins and the wireframes I built for e-commerce platforms. But I stopped. What was the point to them? Anything that didn't involve a suit, a cubicle, and a predictable bi-weekly direct deposit was just a hobby that had gotten out of hand. "Letter B. Graham," Sloane said. She sounded bored. She picked up an oyster with 2 fingers, her nails perfectly manicured in a shade of nude that probably had a name like Executive Beige. "Not everyone is cut out for the corporate grind. Some people just prefer a slower pace." "Speaking of the grind," Diane interjected, her eyes lighting up as she pivoted the spotlight to her favorite subject. "Sloane, tell your uncle about the news. He hasn't heard yet." Sloane set the oyster down. Feigning modesty, she tucked a strand of glossy hair behind her ear. "Oh, it is nothing huge. I just got bumped up to Senior Vice President of Regional Sales." "Senior Vice President," Diane repeated, savoring the syllables like they were fine wine. "At 25, can you imagine?" "And the bonus?" Graham asked, leaning in. "It was substantial," Sloane admitted, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Enough to finally put the down payment on the new place. And I treated myself to the upgrade on the Audi, the Q5. "Good for you." Graham slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "That is what I like to hear. Ambition, results, tangible assets." He looked at me. He didn't say anything, but the comparison hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sloane has an Audi. Aurora drives a sedan that smells like mildew. Sloane is a VP. Aurora is a freelancer. "And Mark and I are booking the trip to the Maldives for next month," Sloane continued, checking her reflection in her spoon. "We need a break. The burnout is real when you are managing a team of 40 people. "The Maldives," Diane sighed dreamily. "You must send pictures. I will put them on the fridge." I sat there, dissecting a shrimp with surgical precision, trying to make myself invisible. This was the ritual. The achievement round. It happened at every family gathering. It was a circle jerk of capitalism where my value was determined solely by my tax bracket. "So, Aurora," Diane said, pivoting back to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Any big news with you? Any new prospects?" She asked it in the same tone one might ask a toddler if they had used the potty successfully. "I finished a branding package for a startup in Austin last week," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I have a potential contract with a local nonprofit coming up." "A nonprofit?" Graham scoffed. "That means no profit, for them or you." "It pays. Uncle Graham," I said, my patience fraying. "It pays fine. But no benefits, right?" My mother cut in. "No health insurance, no matching 401k. "I buy my own insurance. Mom, it is just not stable." "Aurora," she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, "we worry about you. We really do. You are 29. You should be building equity. You should be settling down. Instead, you are living in that box in East Briar, chasing checks. It is not a box, I said, my voice tightening. It is a studio. It is a fire hazard, Sloane chimed in helpfully. I visited once. I was afraid to touch the walls. We just want what is best for you, Diane said, reaching out to pat my hand. Her palm was cool and dry. Maybe you should talk to Sloane. Mark says his company is hiring receptionists. It is entry level, but it is a foot in the door, real benefits, a steady schedule. Receptionist. I had a degree. I had a portfolio. I had clients who loved my work. And my mother was suggesting I answer phones for my younger sister's fiancé because it came with dental. I am not looking for a job, Mom, I said, pulling my hand away. I have a career. A gig is not a career, sweetie, Graham said, pouring himself more wine. It is what you do until you get a career. I felt the familiar sting in my eyes, the hot prick of tears I refused to shed. It wasn't just the insults. It was the casualness of them. They didn't even realize they were twisting the knife. To them, they were just stating facts. The sky is blue. Water is wet. Aurora is a failure. Suddenly, I felt a warm pressure on my left hand, under the table. Holly had reached over and gripped my fingers. She squeezed hard. It was a secret signal, a Morse code of solidarity. I hear it. The squeeze said, I know. Just breathe. I looked at her. Holly was staring intently at her water glass. Her jaw set tight. She couldn't say anything speaking up against Diane, and Graham was a good way to get excommunicated, but she was there. It was the only thing keeping me from standing up and flipping the seafood tower onto my mother's silk blouse. Let's just enjoy the meal, my father said. It was the first time he had spoken in 10 minutes. Ray Mitchell, the master of avoidance. He was cutting his steak with intense concentration, refusing to look at any of us. We are enjoying it, Ray, Diane snapped. We are just having a conversation. We are trying to help Aurora face reality. It is her birthday, Diane, he muttered, still looking at his steak. Maybe we can skip the career counseling for one night. I am not counseling, Diane said, offended. I am parenting. Someone has to. You certainly never do. Ray went silent. He put a piece of meat in his mouth and chewed slowly, retreating back into his shell. He was a good man in theory, but in practice, he was a ghost in his own house. He had learned long ago that the only way to survive Diane was to play dead. I took a sip of water, trying to wash down the lump in my throat. I looked across the table at Sloane. She wasn't eating. She had propped her phone up against the salt shaker. The screen was dark, but I saw the tiny red dot in the corner. She was recording. My stomach turned. She had framed the shot perfectly to include me and the cake that hadn't arrived yet. She was setting the stage. This wasn't just a dinner. It was content. She was waiting for the reaction shot. The moment the spinster sister gets overwhelmed by the family's generosity, or maybe the moment the spinster sister snaps, so she could post it with a caption like, Family drama is real LOL birthday sister chaos. I was trapped in a reality show I hadn't signed a release form for. So, Diane said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin, I have a little surprise coming. I specifically asked the kitchen to bring it out once we cleared the appetizers. You got a cake? Holly asked, her voice hopeful. Chocolate? Better? Diane said, her eyes gleaming with a strange, manic energy. I found a deal. You know I hate waste. And frankly, with the way prices are these days, you have to be smart. A deal on a birthday cake? Graham asked. What? Was it day old? You will see, Diane said. She looked at me, a smile stretching her lips that felt more like a baring of teeth. It is perfectly fine. It is the thought that counts. Right, Aurora? You, of all people, should appreciate saving a few dollars. The air in the restaurant seemed to shift. The ambient noise of clinking silverware and chatter faded into a dull roar. The overhead lights in our section dimmed, casting long, grotesque shadows across the table. Here it comes, Sloane whispered. She tapped her phone screen, ensuring the focus was locked on my face. I turned in my chair. A line of waiters was approaching our table. They weren't singing the usual raucous birthday chant. They looked almost hesitant. The manager was leading them, carrying a large silver platter with a domed lid. My heart hammered against my ribs. Something was wrong. The energy was off. It felt less like a celebration and more like an execution. Ready? Diane asked, her voice trembling with suppressed laughter. Get the camera ready. Sloan? It is rolling. Mom? Sloan said. The manager set the platter down in front of me. He looked at me with eyes that held a flicker of apology. He didn't say happy birthday. He just stepped back. Open it, Diane commanded. Go on. I reached out. The metal handle was cold under my fingers. I looked at Holly. She had let go of my hand and was watching with a furrowed brow. Sensing the malice in the air, I lifted the lid. The smell of chocolate wafted up, sweet and rich, but as the dome cleared, the object on the platter came into focus. It was a cake, or rather, it had been a cake. It was a large, round chocolate cake with white frosting script that read, Happy Birth. The rest of the word was missing, because half the cake was gone. Not a slice, not a piece. 50% of the cake had been severed, leaving a jagged, crumbly cliff face of sponge and filling. The cut wasn't clean. It looked like it had been hacked at with a dull knife. The frosting on the remaining side was smeared, and a single, sad candle leaned precariously to the left, dripping wax onto the exposed layers. For a second, there was total silence. My brain couldn't process it. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they dropped it in the kitchen. Then, the laughter started. It started with a snort from Graham, then a giggle from Sloan, and finally, a full, barking laugh from my mother. Surprise! Diane gasped, clutching her chest. Oh, look at her face, Sloan. Did you get that? I got it, Sloan laughed, holding the phone steady. Classic. I stared at the half-eaten cake. It sat there on the expensive silver platter, a ruin of sugar and flour. It was ugly. It was broken. It was an insult made of confectionery. And in that moment, staring at the jagged edge where the other half should have been, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, final click of a lock turning into place. They hadn't just bought a cheap cake. They had bought a used one. They had brought me the leftovers of someone else's joy. I looked up from the cake. I looked at my mother, who was wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. I looked at my father, who was staring at his lap. I looked at Sloane's camera lens, a black eye staring back at me. Happy birthday to me, I whispered. But I didn't blow out the candle, not yet. First, I had to deliver a surprise of my own. The cake sat there like an open wound. It was chocolate, dark and dense, but the exposed cross-section was dry. The crumbs falling away onto the silver platter like dust. The frosting on the cut side was smeared and hardened, suggesting it had been sliced hours, maybe even a day ago. The writing on top was the worst part. The white piping spelled out Happy Birth, and then stopped abruptly. The letter H severed in half by the knife that had taken the rest of the cake. A single blue candle had been jammed into the sponge at a 45-degree angle, dripping hot wax onto the stale icing. It was grotesque. It was a carcass of a celebration. The silence that had fallen over the table shattered. It broke not with a gasp of horror, but with a roar of laughter. Uncle Graham slapped the table with his heavy hand, making the silverware jump and clatter against the plates. He threw his head back, his mouth wide open, exposing gold fillings and half-chewed seafood. Oh, that is rich, he bellowed. That is absolutely rich. Diane, you really outdid yourself. Sloan was moving. She didn't look at the cake. She looked at her phone screen. She shoved the device closer to my face, the lens hovering inches from my nose. I could see the reflection of my own shock in the black glass. She was zooming in. She was framing the shot to capture the exact moment my heart broke so she could upload it to the cloud for likes. Wait, Sloan giggled, her voice high and breathless. Do not say anything yet. I need the reaction. Look at the cake. Aurora, look at it. My mother, Diane, was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, her shoulders shaking with mirth. She looked delighted. She looked like a woman who had just pulled off the heist of the century. I saved it, she gasped, pointing a manicured finger at the sad, half-eaten monstrosity. I was at the bakery this afternoon picking up bread, and I saw them taking this to the back. They were going to throw it out just because someone bought half of it for a lunch meeting. Can you believe the waste? She looked around the table, seeking validation for her genius. I told the manager, my daughter does not care about presentation. She is practical. She is struggling. Why should I pay $40 for a whole cake when she is used to cutting corners? Diane beamed at me, a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. I got it for $4. Aurora? $4, I told them. It was practically charity. Charity. The word hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. It is perfect for you, Graham wheezed. wiping grease from his chin. Half a cake for half a career. The laughter surged again. A tidal wave of mockery. Even the waiter looked uncomfortable, taking a subtle step back into the shadows, wanting no part of this cruelty. I looked down at the cake. I stared at the jagged edge where the knife had violated the sponge. It wasn't just a pastry. It was a diagram of my place in this family. Sloane got the Audi. Sloane got the trips to the Maldives. Sloane got the whole cake. I got the leftovers. I got the scraps that were destined for the trash can. They didn't see a daughter sitting there. They saw a discount bin item. They saw something broken that didn't deserve full price. My hands were in my lap, clenched so tight my fingernails were digging crescents into my palms. I could feel the sting of the skin breaking, a sharp, grounding pain that kept me from screaming. "This is not funny," a voice cut through the noise. It was Holly. She wasn't laughing. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fury. She looked from the cake to Diane, her mouth open in disbelief. "Aunt Diane, this is mean," Holly said, her voice shaking slightly. "Take it away. Order a real dessert." Diane's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then hardened into a mask of annoyance. She waved a hand at Holly as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. Holly," Diane snapped. "Aurora knows it is a joke. We are a family that jokes. God, everyone is so sensitive these days. You cannot even have a little fun without the PC police jumping down your throat." "It is not a joke," Holly insisted, her voice rising. "It is humiliation. It is savings," Graham shouted, banging his glass down. "It is a lesson in economics. Eat the cake, Aurora. It tastes the same, doesn't it?" Sloane moved the phone closer, the camera light blinding me. "Come on, Aurora," she urged, her voice dripping with fake encouragement. "Blow out the candle. Make a wish. Wish for a real job." She laughed at her own wit. I sat there, frozen. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. I felt the heat rising up my neck, burning my cheeks. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to flip the table, to cry, to give them exactly what they wanted, the emotional collapse of the disappointment daughter. But then, something shifted. It was physical. A sensation of cold water pouring over the top of my head, washing down my spine, extinguishing the fire of my embarrassment. The room seemed to slow down. The laughter sounded warped, distant, like audio playing underwater. The details of the moment became hyper-real. I saw the pores on Graham's nose. I saw the tiny crack in Sloane's veneer. I saw the desperate neediness in my mother's eyes. They were feeding on me. They were vampires of dignity, sucking the self-worth out of me to fill the empty voids in themselves. And I was done being their meal. My breathing evened out. The frantic thumping in my chest slowed to a steady, heavy beat. Thump, thump, thump. I unclasped my hands. I placed them flat on the table, on either side of the silver platter. The metal was cold against my wrists. I lifted my head. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at them. I looked at Sloane, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel envious of her beauty. I saw the fear behind it. I saw how desperate she was for content because her real life was empty. I looked at my father, who was still studying the tablecloth like it held the secrets of the universe, a coward in a collared shirt. I looked at Diane. She was waiting for the tears. She was waiting for the "thank you, Mom. You are right. I am trash" speech. I leaned forward. The flame of the single, crooked blue candle danced in the air conditioning. It was a pathetic little light, struggling to stay alive. I took a deep breath, not a shaky, crying breath, a deep, lung-filling inhale of power, and I blew. Whoosh! The candle went out. A thin trail of gray smoke rose up, curling around Sloane's phone lens like a snake. The smell of sulfur and burnt wax cut through the scent of expensive seafood. I didn't clap. I didn't smile. I pushed my chair back. The sound was hideous, a long, high-pitched screech of wood dragging against the polished concrete floor. Scree! It was the sound of a record scratching. It was the sound of a weapon being drawn. The table went silent instantly. The laughter died in their throats. Graham's mouth snapped shut. Sloane lowered her phone slightly, her brow furrowing in confusion. This wasn't in the script. I was supposed to sit there and take it. I wasn't supposed to stand up. I stood to my full height. I was 5'7", but in that moment, I felt 10 feet tall. I smoothed the front of my thrifted blazer. I picked up my purse from the floor and slung it over my shoulder. "Aurora," my mother said, her voice uncertain. The smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of doubt. "Where are you going?" We have not cut the cake. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at Sloane. My eyes were locked on one person, Uncle Graham. He was staring up at me, his face flushed with wine and arrogance, but his eyes were darting back and forth. Sensing a predator, I walked around the table. My heels clicked on the floor. Click, click, click. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate. I walked past Holly, brushing her shoulder gently to let her know she was safe. I walked past my father. I stopped directly behind Graham's chair. I could smell him. He smelled of scotch, Old Spice, and sweat. He shifted in his seat, the leather creaking under his weight. He started to turn his head to look at me. "What is your problem?" he started to bluster. "Sit down and—" I leaned down. I brought my face close to his ear, invading his personal space, crossing the boundary he thought his money protected him from. My lips were inches from his skin. I could see the coarse hairs on his earlobe. The restaurant noise faded away. For a moment, it was just me and him in a bubble of impending doom. I lowered my voice to a whisper. It wasn't a hiss. It was flat, calm, and deadly factual. "I know who used my social security number." I felt his body seize. It was instant, a rigor mortis of terror. The muscles in his neck locked up. The hand holding his wineglass froze in midair. I pulled back slightly, just enough to see his profile. The transformation was immediate and total. The flushed red of his face drained away as if someone had pulled a plug. In the span of 2 seconds, his skin turned a sickly, paste-like gray. His mouth, which had been ready to spew more insults, hung slightly open, slack and trembling. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the raw, naked look of a man who has just seen the ghost of his own crimes. He didn't turn to look at me. He couldn't. He stared straight ahead at the centerpiece, his eyes unseeing, his breath caught in his throat. The rest of the table was watching us, baffled. They hadn't heard what I said. They only saw the result. They saw Graham, the loudmouth, the bully, suddenly reduced to a statue of fear. "Graham?" Diane asked, her voice sharp. "What is wrong? What did she say?" He didn't answer. He couldn't speak. I stood up straight again, looking down at the top of his thinning hair. I felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and intoxicating. I held the power now. I held the detonator. I looked across the table at the rest of them. Sloane was still recording, but her hand had dropped, the phone capturing the table at a chaotic angle. Diane looked furious and confused, sensing that she had lost control of the room, but not understanding why. I looked at the cake one last time, the jagged, ugly thing that was supposed to be me. "Just eat the cake," I said. My voice was normal volume, but in the silence of our table, it sounded like a gavel strike. "It would be a shame to waste it," I added, my eyes sliding back to Graham's terrified profile. "Since it cost you so much." I turned on my heel. I didn't run. I didn't storm out. I walked with the long, confident strides of a woman who had nothing left to lose because it had already been stolen. "Aurora, get back here," Diane shrieked behind me. "Do not you dare walk away from me. I paid for this dinner." "Aurora," my father's voice, weak and pleading. I kept walking, past the hostess stand where the girl was texting, past the bar where people were laughing, oblivious to the bomb I had just dropped. I pushed open the heavy front doors of copper ash. The night air hit my face, cool and clean. It tasted like freedom. I walked to my car, my hands shaking now, the adrenaline dumping into my system. But I wasn't shaking from sadness. I was shaking from the sheer magnitude of what I had just done. I got into my beat-up sedan and locked the doors. I looked back at the restaurant through the windshield, through the large front windows. I could see my family's table. They were in chaos. Diane was standing up, gesturing wildly. Sloane was typing furiously on her phone, but Graham was still sitting there, frozen, staring at the empty space where I had been standing, looking like a man waiting for the police sirens to start wailing. I put the key in the ignition. The engine coughed and roared to life. "Happy birthday, Aurora," I said to the empty car. And for the first time in 29 years, I actually meant it. To understand why I blew out the candle and walked away from my family, you have to go back. You have to rewind the tape exactly 4 months. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early June. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and my mother, Diane, was in the middle of one of her performative acts of charity. She had decided to donate her old electronics to a local women's shelter. It was a noble gesture on paper, but in reality, it was an excuse to make me drive out to Wellington Ridge to do unpaid IT work. "Just wipe it clean, Aurora," she had said, bustling around her kitchen, making a show of organizing canned goods. You are the tech genius. I do not want anyone stealing my identity. God knows what hackers can do these days. The irony of that sentence would not hit me until about 20 minutes later. I was sitting at the kitchen island. The laptop was an old silver model, heavy and thick, the kind that wheezed when you turned it on. The screen was covered in fingerprints, and the keyboard had crumbs between the keys, evidence of my mother's late-night online shopping habits. "I am going to run to the store to get boxes," Diane called out, grabbing her purse. "I will be back in an hour. Make sure it is completely empty." "Okay, factory settings." "Got it. Mom," I said, not looking up. The front door slammed. I was alone. I booted up the machine. It groaned to life, the fan spinning loudly. The desktop appeared, a chaotic minefield of icons. My mother was the type of person who saved everything to the desktop. There were hundreds of files overlapping each other. Recipes for keto lasagna. Screenshots of furniture she wanted to buy. Low-resolution photos of the dog. I started the process of organizing what needed to be saved to an external drive before the wipe. I was dragging and dropping files with the mindless rhythm of someone who had done this a dozen times before. Then, my mouse hovered over a folder tucked away in the bottom right corner. It was named Tax Lending Do Not Delete. I paused. My mother had specifically told me to save her insurance papers and bank statements. That seemed normal, but something about the phrasing lending made me hesitate. My parents had paid off their mortgage years ago. They bragged about being debt-free constantly. It was one of the many sticks they used to beat me with. We own our home. You rent a box. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but in a family like mine, it is a survival mechanism. I double-clicked the folder. It opened to reveal a series of subfolders labeled by year, 2022, 2023, 2024. I opened the most recent one. Inside, there were no recipes. There were PDF files, dozens of them, and the file names were not random. They were specific. Terrifyingly specific. Capital One approval letter, PDF Chase Slate verification, PDF. Amex Platinum card holder agreement, PDF. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. My mother didn't use Capital One. She was a loyalist to a local credit union, and she hated American Express because they didn't have a branch she could walk into and complain at. I opened the first PDF. It was an approval letter for a credit card with a $15,000 limit. I scanned the header. Applicant Aurora Mitchell. I blinked. I leaned closer to the screen, thinking maybe the dust was playing tricks on my eyes. Applicant Aurora Mitchell. SSN XXX. My number. My actual social security number. Address P.O. Box 492, Wellington Ridge, PA. My breath hitched. I did not have a P.O. box in Wellington Ridge. I lived in East Briar. I had never applied for this card. I couldn't have applied for this card. My credit score had been hovering in the low 600s for 2 years, a fact that had baffled me and kept me awake at night. I closed the PDF and opened the next one, a personal loan agreement, $10,000, approved, borrower. Aurora Mitchell. I opened another, a line of credit for home improvement, $5,000, approved, borrower, Aurora Mitchell. My hands started to shake. I wasn't cold, but my teeth were chattering. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a computer glitch. This was a dossier. I minimized the folder and opened the web browser. It was Chrome, and my mother, in her technological laziness, had left her email logged in. I shouldn't have looked. That is what a good daughter would say. A good daughter would respect privacy, but a good daughter doesn't get identity theft for her birthday. I clicked on the search bar in her email and typed my own name, Aurora. The results populated instantly. And it was like staring into the abyss. There were hundreds of emails, not emails to me, but emails about me, or rather, about the entity that was wearing my name. DocuSign. Please sign your loan agreement. Credit Karma. New inquiry on your report. Experian credit score update for Aurora Mitchell. I clicked on a thread from 6 months ago. The subject line was RE verification issue. Graham. My stomach turned over. Graham. Uncle Graham. I opened the email. It was a conversation between my mother and her brother. From Graham Realtor to Diane M. Dye. The bank is asking for a secondary proof of address for the new card. The PMO box is flagging the system. Do you have a utility bill you can Photoshop, or just use the electric bill from the rental property? And then, my mother's reply, I will handle it. Are you sure this won't trigger an alert on her end? She mentioned she was thinking about getting a new car soon. And then, Graham's response. The sentence that I would memorize. The sentence that I would whisper into his ear 4 months later in a crowded restaurant. Don't worry about it. Use her name. She rarely checks her credit. She is too busy being creative and broke. By the time she notices, we will have cycled the debt. It is cleaner this way. Cleaner. He called my life dirty. He called my financial ruin a hygiene strategy. I sat back in the chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The air in the kitchen felt too thin. I couldn't get enough oxygen. They weren't just borrowing money, they were running a syndicate. My mother and my uncle were using my identity as a slush fund. I kept digging. I was in a trance now, a fugue state of investigation. I found the tax returns. My mother always told me she had a guy who did taxes and that I should just let her handle mine to save money. It is complicated being a freelancer, she would say. Let mommy help. I opened the file labeled 2T23, Tax Return Final, PDF. I scrolled down to the Dependents section. Line 6C. There was my name. Aurora Mitchell. Checked as a dependent. I was 28 years old that year. I paid my own rent. I paid for my own food. I lived in a different zip code. But according to the IRS, I was a helpless child living under Diane's roof, providing her with a hefty tax write-off. You are not independent enough, she would tell me at dinner. You need to grow up. Meanwhile, she was legally claiming I was a child to save $2,000 on her taxes, but the biggest blow was yet to come. I went back to the tax lending folder. There was a subfolder I had missed. It was labeled simply LLC. I opened it. It contained a certificate of formation from the Secretary of State. Entity name, Gray Pine Home Solutions, LLC. Registered Agent Aurora Mitchell. Principal Office P.O., Box 492, Wellington Ridge, PA, Gray Pine, Graham and Diane. Pine Street, where my grandmother used to live. They had started a company in my name, a home solutions company. I quickly searched the email archive for Gray Pine. I found invoices. They were billing people for renovations. $10,000 here, $15,000 there. And the money was flowing into a business account that, according to the setup emails, was linked to my social security number but controlled by Graham's phone number for two-factor authentication. I realized then that this wasn't just about credit cards. This was about liability. If Gray Pine Home Solutions screwed up a job, or got sued, or didn't pay its taxes, they wouldn't come for Graham. They wouldn't come for Diane. They would come for Aurora Mitchell. I was the shield. I was the fall guy. I was the patsy in a long con run by the two people who were supposed to protect me. I looked at the clock. 30 minutes had passed. Diane would be back soon. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. I wanted to smash the laptop. I wanted to scream. No, a voice inside me said. It sounded like the voice I used when a client refused to pay. Cold, professional, get the evidence. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I didn't trust a USB stick if I plugged one in. It might leave a digital footprint in the registry. I started taking photos of the screen. I photographed the emails. I photographed the credit card applications. I photographed the tax returns. I photographed the LLC registration. Then, I did something smarter. I opened a private browser window. I logged into a cloud storage account that my family didn't know existed, my professional Dropbox. I dragged the entire tax lending folder into the browser window. Uploading the progress bar crawled across the screen. 20%, 50%. I heard a car door slam outside. My heart stopped. 70%. I heard the key in the front door lock. 90%. Aurora. I forgot my wallet. Diane's voice drifted in from the hallway. 100%. Upload complete. I closed the browser window. I cleared the history. I closed the folder on the desktop. By the time Diane walked into the kitchen, I was staring at a blank recycling bin icon, my face a mask of boredom. Did you find it? I asked, my voice sounding strangely calm. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like the voice of a stranger. Yes, silly me, Diane laughed. Grabbing her wallet from the counter, she glanced at the laptop. How is it going? Almost done? Yeah, I said. I just backed up the photos of the dog. I am about to run the final wipe now. Great, she said. She walked over to me. I tensed. I expected her to see it. I expected her to smell the knowledge on me. I expected her to see the reflection of her own crimes in my eyes. But she didn't look at me. She looked at the laptop screen. Make sure you get everything, she said. I do not want any personal data left on there. You can never be too careful. I know, Mom, I said. I am wiping it all. She smiled. She leaned down and kissed me on the forehead. Her lips were dry. You are such a lifesaver. Aurora, she said, I do not know what I would do without you. She turned and walked back out the door. I sat there, feeling the spot on my forehead where she had kissed me. It felt like a brand. I do not know what I would do without you. She meant it. She literally did not know how she would commit tax fraud and launder money without me. I looked at the screen. The factory reset option was highlighted. This will erase all data on the hard drive. This action cannot be undone. I clicked confirm. The screen went black. Then a progress bar appeared. I watched the blue line creep across the screen, deleting the local evidence of their betrayal. But it didn't matter. The truth was already safe in the cloud. That was 4 months ago. For 120 days, I played the part. I went to Sunday dinners. I nodded when Graham made jokes about my poverty. I let Sloane brag about her credit score, knowing full well that mine was being artificially suppressed by the very people sitting at the table. I waited. I built my case. I tracked the spending. I watched the Grey Pine account siphon money. I waited for the perfect moment. I waited for a moment when they would feel so safe, so superior, so untouchable, that they wouldn't see the blade coming until it was already buried in their side. And then, they invited me to a birthday dinner at Copper Ash, and they served me half a cake. It was the signal I had been waiting for. It was the permission slip. If they were going to treat me like a joke, I was going to make sure the punchline destroyed them. The days following the discovery on my mother's laptop were a blur of nausea and cold. Hard data entry. I did not sleep. I could not eat. I sat in my drafty apartment in East Briar, illuminated only by the blue light of my computer screen, and I pulled the thread that would unravel my entire life. I started with the credit bureaus. I paid $30 to access the full, detailed reports from all 3 major agencies. I had been too afraid to look at them for years, conditioned by my family to believe that my financial struggles were a result of my own incompetence. You are bad with money. Aurora, you are an artist. You do not understand finance. I opened the file for Equifax first. It was a bloodbath. My score was 580. For a woman who paid her rent on time and had never missed a student loan payment, it was mathematically impossible. Until I scrolled down to the inquiries and open accounts sections, there were 7 credit cards open in my name. 7. I only had one in my wallet, a secured card with a $500 limit that I used for groceries to try and build my history. The other 6 were ghosts. There was a Chase Sapphire card with a $20,000 limit, nearly maxed out. There was a Discover card with a balance of $8,000. There was a store card for a high-end furniture outlet in Wellington Ridge with a balance of $4,000. I looked at the payment history. It was a checkerboard of current and 30 days late. They were paying the minimums, most of the time, but every few months, they would miss a payment, or pay late, tanking my score just enough to keep me in the subprime basement. I sat back in my chair, the realization washing over me like ice water. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't that I was a failure. It wasn't that I didn't work hard enough. I had been swimming with weights tied to my ankles, and the people standing on the boat, watching me struggle to keep my head above water, were the ones who had tied the knots. They were the ones yelling at me to swim harder, mocking my stroke, telling me I was weak, all while they enjoyed the view. I looked at the dates. The first card was opened 2 years ago, right around the time I had asked my father for help co-signing a lease for a better apartment. He had said no. He had said I needed to learn independence. 2 weeks later, that Chase card was opened. They used my independence as a cover to steal my identity. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Screaming would not help. Screaming was what the old Aurora would do. The new Aurora needed a spreadsheet. I needed a sanity check. I needed to say the words out loud to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I called Holly. We met at a dive bar halfway between East Briar and Wellington Ridge. It was a Tuesday night, and the place was empty. We sat in a booth in the back. The vinyl cracked and peeling. I put my tablet on the table. I didn't say anything. I just opened the folder labeled Evidence and swiped through the screenshots, the tax returns, the credit card statements, the LLC formation documents. Holly read them in silence. Her face went from confused to pale to horrified. She read the email from Graham Cleaner this way, and she put her hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Aurora, this is a felony. This is federal prison." "I know," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. "I have 5 credit cards I never applied for. I have a personal loan for $10,000 that I never saw a penny of. And apparently, I am the owner of a construction company." Holly looked up at me. her eyes filling with tears. "They have been gaslighting you," she said. "All those dinners, all those times Aunt Diane made comments about your clothes or your car, they were stealing from you and then mocking you for being poor." "I thought I was crazy," I admitted. "I thought I was just broken." I looked at Sloane, and I wondered why it was so easy for her, why she just floated through life while I had to claw for every inch. Holly reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was fierce. "You are not crazy. Aurora, you are not a failure. You are a victim. You are being used as a wallet." Hearing her say it, used as a wallet, solidified something in my chest. It turned the sadness into steel. "I do not know what to do," I said. "If I go to the police now, Diane will spin it. She will say I authorized it. She will say I am an ungrateful daughter trying to ruin the family because I am jealous. She is good at that. She is the best at that." "But you have proof," Holly argued. "I have emails," I said. "But emails can be explained away." "Oh, Aurora forgot she gave us permission. Aurora is mentally unstable. I need more. I need to know where the money is going." I went back to the investigation with a renewed focus. I had the what and the how. Now I needed the where. I focused on the LLC Grapevine Home Solutions. It was a clever setup. The LLC was registered in my name, which meant I was liable for its taxes and its debts, but the bank account associated with it was digital only. I managed to find the routing number on one of the PDF invoices in the tax lending folder. I cross-referenced the invoices. Grapevine was billing people for consulting and project management. The money would come into the Grapevine account. Then, within 24 hours, it would be transferred out. But where did it go? I dug through the trash folder of my mother's email again. Searching for bank notifications, I found a transfer confirmation from 3 months ago. Transfer complete, $5,000 sounds, from Grapevine Solutions to account ending in 8892. I didn't recognize the account ending in 8892. I went back to the email thread between Graham and Diane. I searched for 8892. Nothing. Then I tried searching for just the number 8892 in the body of all emails. One result popped up. It was an old email, dated 2 years ago. It wasn't from Graham. It was from Sloane. From Sloane Mitchell. Subject: direct deposit info mom. "Here's the routing info for my new checking account so you can transfer the birthday money. Account ending in 8892. I stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis. Graham, I expected. Diane, I expected. They were the architects. They were the bitter, greedy older generation. But Sloane, my baby sister Sloane, who I had taught to ride a bike, Sloane, who I had defended from bullies in middle school. I looked at the date of the $5,000 transfer. It was March 15th. I opened a new tab and went to Sloane's Instagram. I scrolled back to March. There it was. March 16th, a photo of Sloane standing next to a gleaming white Audi SUV, holding a set of keys, a giant red bow on the hood. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. So blessed to finally buy my dream car. Boss babe new car blessed. Hard work." She hadn't paid for the down payment with hard work. She had paid for it with the money laundered through my credit rating. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just a few bad apples. The whole tree was rotten. They were all in on it. They were passing my identity around like a serving platter, taking cuts whenever they needed a boost, leaving me with the empty plate. Sloane knew, I whispered to the empty room. She knew. That was the moment the last shred of hesitation evaporated. I had been debating whether to confront them privately, to print out the papers, slam them on the dining table, and demand they pay it off and close the accounts. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I threatened them enough, they would fix it to avoid jail. But now that I knew Sloane was posting hashtags about blessings purchased with my stolen life, no. A private confrontation was not enough. If I confronted them privately, they would circle the wagons. They would gaslight me. They would cry. Diane would clutch her chest and talk about her blood pressure. Graham would threaten me. Sloane would play the innocent victim. They would manipulate the narrative until I was the one apologizing. I needed to catch them in a lie so big, so public, that they couldn't spin their way out of it. I needed a trap. I continued to monitor the accounts. I didn't cancel the cards. I didn't freeze my credit yet. I let them think everything was normal. I let them think the dummy was still asleep at the wheel. Every time a notification popped up, new charge $200 liquor store, I took a screenshot. I added it to the timeline. I was building a dossier that was thicker than a phone book. I watched them living their lives on social media. I watched Graham check in at golf courses. I watched Diane post photos of expensive brunches. I watched Sloane show off her hauls from shopping sprees, and every time I saw them smile, I added a line to my spreadsheet. If they think I am a joke, I told myself, staring at a photo of the three of them clinking glasses, then I will be the joke that chokes them. Then, the text came. It was a Monday evening in October. My phone buzzed. Mom is doing a birthday thing for you. Don't worry. Just come. The invitation. My first instinct was to say no. I couldn't stomach seeing them. I couldn't sit there and pretend to be the dutiful, struggling daughter while I knew they were criminals. But then I stopped. A birthday dinner, at Copper Ash, a public place, a place where they would be performing their perfect family act for an audience. It was the perfect stage. They expected me to be the prop. They expected me to show up, look grateful for whatever scraps they threw me, and let them feel superior. They didn't know that the prop had a detonator. I looked at the text from Holly. I typed my reply. My fingers steady. I'll be there. I wasn't going there to celebrate my 29th year. I was going there to celebrate the end of theirs. I spent the days leading up to the dinner preparing. I didn't prepare a speech. I prepared my exit strategy. I organized the files. I made sure the cloud backups were secure. I contacted a lawyer named Mara Benton, a friend of a friend who specialized in civil litigation, and sent her a secure link to the dossier with a note. If anything happens to me, or if I lose my nerve, open this. I was ready. As I drove to Copper Ash that night, seeing the lights of Wellington Ridge looming ahead, I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, grim satisfaction. They thought they were surprising me with a dinner. They thought they were going to have a little fun at my expense, maybe give me a cheap gift, maybe make a few jokes about my career. They had no idea that I was bringing the receipt for every single thing they had stolen, and when that cake arrived, that half-eaten, pathetic excuse for a cake I knew instantly, it wasn't just an insult, it was a metaphor. It was the physical manifestation of what they had done to me. They had taken the best parts of my life, consumed them, and left me the crumbs. But they forgot one thing about crumbs. If you have enough of them, you can start a fire. The drive away from Copper Ash was a blur of neon lights and adrenaline. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, but my mind was crystal clear. I had pulled the pin on the grenade, dropped it on the table, and walked away before the explosion. But the blast wave was faster than my car. I had barely made it onto the highway leading back to East Briar when my phone, sitting on the passenger seat, began to convulse. It lit up the dark interior of the car like a strobe light. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was not a rhythmic ringing. It was a continuous, frantic spasm. I glanced at the screen. Incoming call, Mom. Missed call, Uncle Graham. Text message, Sloan. 5, incoming call, Mom. I let it ring. I let the sound fill the small cabin of my sedan. A chaotic soundtrack to my escape. I needed the distance. I needed to be back in my own territory, behind the locked door of my apartment. Before I engaged with the enemy, by the time I parked my car in the lot outside my building, I had 23 missed calls and 14 text messages. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs, my boots heavy on the concrete. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and threw my keys on the counter. The apartment was cold, but it felt safe. It was paid for with my money, my clean, hard-earned, honest money. I sat down on my thrifted sofa and picked up the phone. It started ringing again immediately. Mom. I took a deep breath. I channeled the cold, detached energy I had felt in the restaurant. I slid my thumb across the screen to answer. Hello, Mother, I said. My voice was calm, almost bored. Aurora? Her voice was a shriek, high and shrill, vibrating with a panic I had never heard before. She wasn't playing the victim yet. She was in damage control mode. What the hell is wrong with you? Where are you? I am home, I said. I decided to skip dessert. I was full. Do not play games with me, she snapped. Graham is in the bathroom throwing up. He's having a panic attack. What did you say to him? He will not speak. He is just shaking. I leaned back against the cushions. I think he is just suffering from a guilty conscience. Mom, it can cause nausea. What did you say? She demanded again. You whispered something to him. What was it? Notice that she did not ask about the cake. She did not ask why I had walked out. She did not apologize for the public humiliation she had orchestrated. Her only concern was the secret. She could smell the smoke, and she was terrified of the fire. I told him I knew, I said simply. There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was a heavy, loaded silence. I could hear her breathing. Short, sharp breaths. Knew what? She asked, her voice dropping an octave, trying to sound confused but failing miserably. You are talking nonsense. You have been acting so strange lately. Is this about the cake? Because honestly, Aurora, if you are going to be this dramatic over a joke. I know about the credit cards, Mom. I cut her off. The silence that followed was total. It was the silence of a vacuum. I know about the loans, I continued, my voice steady. I know about the tax returns where you claimed me as a dependent. I know about Grey Pine Home Solutions. I know everything. You, she stammered, you are imagining things. You do not understand how finances work. I understand that using someone else's social security number without their permission is a federal crime, I said. Identity theft, fraud, tax evasion. Shall I go on? You ungrateful little brat, she hissed. The mask dropped completely. The loving, concerned mother was gone, replaced by the cornered animal. We did that for you. We were building credit for you. We were trying to help you because you are too incompetent to do it yourself. Helping me? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. By tanking my score, by racking up $40,000 in debt, by laundering money through a shell company in my name. It is not laundering, she shouted. It is business. You are part of this family. Families help each other. We needed liquidity. Graham was in a bind. I needed to bridge a gap. We were going to pay it back. We always pay the minimums. You put me on the hook for a construction company, Mom, I said. If a wall falls on someone, they sue me, not you, me. You are blowing this out of proportion, she said, her voice shifting again, trying to find a foothold. She went for the gaslight. You are always so sensitive, so dramatic. You take one little thing and twist it. Every family does this. It is how wealth is built. We use the resources we have. Why do you have to make it so ugly? I did not make it ugly, I said. I just turned on the lights. You listen to me, she threatened. If you tell anyone about this, if you try to ruin your uncle, you are ruining yourself too. You are the one on the papers. You are the one who signed everything. I did not sign anything, I said. And I have the IP logs to prove it. She gasped. You hacked us. I cleaned the computer. Mom, just like you asked. I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the confrontation. I had never spoken to her like that. I had never held the power. It was intoxicating, and it was terrifying. The phone rang again instantly. Sloan, I stared at the screen. My sister, the golden child, the beneficiary of the crime. I answered. You are a bitch, Sloan spat before I could even say hello. Happy birthday to you too. Sloan, I said. Mom is crying in the car. Sloan screamed. Dad is just sitting there looking like a zombie. Graham left in an Uber because he couldn't drive. You ruined everything. You ruined the whole night. The cake was half eaten. Sloan, I said. I think the night was ruined before I even got there. It was a joke, she yelled. God, you have no sense of humor. You are so jealous. You have always been jealous. Just because I have a life and you have nothing, you have to drag everyone down to your level. Is that what you think? I asked. You think I'm jealous of your life? I know you are, she sneered. I see the way you look at my clothes, my trips, my car. The Audi, I said. The Q5, white, leather interior. Yeah, the Audi, she said. The one I bought with my bonus. The one you could never afford. I closed my eyes. This was the moment, the point of no return. Sloan, I said softly, do you know where the down payment for that car came from? I told you, she said defensive. My bonus. No, I said. Your bonus was $2,000. I saw the deposit slip in Mom's email. The down payment was $8,000. It was transferred from the Grey Pine account on March 15th, the same day the loan in my name was funded. There was silence on the other end. I do not know what you are talking about, she said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had a moment ago. It was wavering. You do, I said. You sent Mom the email with your routing number. You knew the money was coming from Grey Pine. You knew Grey Pine was in my name. You knew. Sloan. Mom said. Sloan's voice cracked. She sounded younger now, like the little sister I used to protect. Mom said she had a way to move money around. She said it was an inheritance advance from Grandma's estate. Grandma died 4 years ago. Sloan. Her estate is closed. I didn't ask, she shouted, panic rising in her voice. I didn't ask where it came from. She just gave it to me. Why would I question free money? Because it wasn't free, I said cold. It cost me my credit. It cost me my future. You are driving a stolen car. Sloan. And I paid for it. You are lying, she whispered. You are just trying to scare me. Check your email. Sloan, search for Grapevine. See if you can find the lie. You are destroying this family, she sobbed. Why are you doing this? I am not doing anything, I said. I am just stopping you from eating the rest of my cake. I hung up on her too. I tossed the phone onto the cushion next to me. It immediately lit up with a text message. It was Holly. Holly. Just left the restaurant. It is a war zone. Diane is calling everyone. She is calling Aunt Martha, Cousin Ben, even the neighbors. She is telling them you had a mental breakdown at dinner. She says you are off your meds and making up stories. I read the text and felt a cold smirk touch my lips. Of course, the smear campaign. It was the narcissist's standard operating procedure. If you cannot control the person, control the narrative. She was trying to discredit me before I could show the evidence. She was trying to paint me as the crazy, unstable daughter, so that when the truth came out, everyone would dismiss it as a delusion. Holly. She is trying to sink the stories. She is telling Graham to say the LLC was a joint venture you agreed to. She is telling Sloan to delete her emails. They are terrified. Aurora. They were scrambling. They were trying to patch the holes in the Titanic with chewing gum. I picked up the phone again. I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. Not this time. I opened the family group chat. The Mitchell Family Fun. A group chat I had been muted in for years, only checking it to see when the next obligatory gathering was. It included everyone, Mom, Dad, Graham, Sloan, Holly, and a few aunts and cousins. I typed a message. I kept it short. I kept it lethal. To everyone. I am not having a breakdown. I am having a forensic audit. Mom is currently calling you to tell you I am crazy because she is afraid of what I found in her financial records. I have the bank statements, the IP logs, and the forged applications. Anyone who wants to know the actual truth can call me directly. Everyone else can wait for the subpoenas. I hit send. The phone, which had been buzzing every few seconds, suddenly went dead silent. It was as if I had sucked all the oxygen out of the digital room. The typing bubbles that had been flashing from Diane and Sloan vanished. They were reading it. They were processing the word subpoenas. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. I expected Graham to call and scream. I expected Diane to text me a novel of guilt-tripping manipulation, but the phone rang with a name I did not expect. Incoming call, Dad. I stared at the screen. My father. Ray Mitchell, the man who had sat at the dinner table and studied his steak while his wife and brother mocked his daughter. The man who had been a silent piece of furniture in my life for 20 years. He never called me. He only spoke to me when Mom handed him the phone. I picked it up. My hand was trembling again. Hello. Aurora. His voice was quiet. It sounded old, tired. Hi, Dad. Are you safe? He asked. I blinked. It was such a simple question. But it was the first time tonight, maybe the first time in years, that anyone in my immediate family had asked about my well-being. I am in my apartment, I said. I am fine. Your mother is? He paused, searching for the word. She is in a state. She is tearing the house apart looking for files. She won't find them, I said. I have them. I know, he said. I saw the text. Are you calling to tell me to stop? I asked. My defenses going up. Are you calling to tell me to be a good daughter and take the fall for the family? Because I won't do it. Dad, I am done. No, he said. The word was firm. I am not calling for that. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the faint sound of shouting in the background on his end. Diane's voice, muffled and hysterical. I heard what you said to Graham, Ray said. At the restaurant, about the social security number. It is true, I said. I believe you, he said. My breath hitched. You do. I have suspected, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. I saw letters come to the house. Credit card offers in your name. I asked Diane about them, and she told me she was handling your mail because you moved around so much. I chose to believe her because it was easier. I chose peace over truth. You let them steal from me, I said, a tear finally escaping and rolling down my cheek. I did, he said, and I am sorry. I am so sorry. Aurora. It wasn't a fix. It didn't erase the debt. It didn't undo the years of neglect, but it was a crack in the wall. What are you going to do? Dad, I asked. I am going to go to the guest room, he said, and I am going to lock the door, and tomorrow I am going to come see you, without your mother. Okay, I whispered. You stand your ground. Aurora, he said. His voice dropped to a whisper, as if he was afraid Diane might hear him through the floorboards. Do not let them bully you. You hold the cards now. Play them. He hung up. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, the phone warm in my hand. I looked at the half-empty box of tissues on my coffee table. They had tried to bury me. They had piled debt and shame and mockery on top of me, thinking I would just suffocate under the weight of it. But they forgot that I was a designer. I knew how to build things, and I knew how to take them apart. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the email to Mara Benton, the lawyer. The draft was sitting there, with the attachment labeled, Evidence Final, Zip. I didn't send it yet. I wanted to see what happened tomorrow. I wanted to see my father face to face. But I did one thing. I went to the credit bureau website. I logged in. Freeze credit report. I clicked the button. Confirm. The screen flashed green. Your credit file is now frozen. No new accounts can be opened. It was a small click, but it felt like the slamming of a vault door. The Bank of Aurora was closed, and the foreclosure on the Mitchell family was about to begin. The next morning, the sky over East Briar was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that refused to fall. I sat in a booth at a 24-hour diner called The Kettle, clutching a mug of black coffee that tasted faintly of dish soap. Across from me sat my father. Ray Mitchell looked 10 years older than he had the night before. He was wearing a windbreaker that was zipped up to his chin, as if he were trying to armor himself against the world. He hadn't touched his eggs. He was just staring at my hands, specifically at the stack of papers I had placed between us. I did not know about the company, he said. His voice was rough, like he had spent the night shouting, or crying, or both. I knew they were using your name for credit adjustments. That is what your mother called them. Credit adjustments. She said you had agreed to it to help build your score while she managed the payments. And you believed that, I asked. I didn't say it with anger. I said it with exhaustion. I wanted to, he admitted. He looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. But about 6 months ago, I heard them arguing in the sunroom. Graham was shouting about liability. He kept saying, if the inspector catches the wiring in the flip house, who goes down? And Diane said, don't worry. The papers are in Aurora's name. She is the registered agent. We are just employees. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. She said that, I asked, explicitly. She said, the shield is in place, Ray whispered. I did not know what she meant by shield. I thought maybe she meant insurance, but when I saw your text last night about the LLC. He reached out and touched the edge of the paper stack. They built a wall out of you, Aurora, he said, so that if the fire ever came, you would burn instead of them. That was the confirmation I needed. It wasn't just greed. It was a calculated, premeditated strategy to use me as human insulation against legal blowback. I left my father at the diner. He offered to pay for my coffee, a small, pathetic gesture of penance, but I put a $5 bill on the table before he could open his wallet. I didn't want his money. I wanted his testimony, but for now, his admission was enough fuel to keep me moving. My next stop was not a family home, but a glass and steel building in downtown Wellington Ridge. Mara Benton was a civil litigation attorney who had been recommended by a friend of a friend. She was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite sharp features, a severe bob cut, and eyes that assessed your net worth in 3 seconds. I sat in her office, which smelled of expensive leather and old books. I laid it all out, the timeline, the screenshots from the tax lending folder, the credit reports I had pulled, the audio recording of my conversation with Graham, which I hadn't made, but I wrote down verbatim notes immediately after. Mara didn't gasp. She didn't look horrified. She flipped through the pages with the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at an X-ray of a broken bone. This is not a dispute, she said, finally looking up. This is a RICO case waiting to happen. I just want the debt gone, I said. I want my name off their mess. We will get the debt gone, she said, opening a file on her laptop. But you need to understand what you are looking at here. Aurora, I ran a preliminary search on Gray Pine Home Solutions this morning after you sent me the intake form. She turned the laptop screen toward me. This entity has moved over $200,000 in the last 18 months, she said. My jaw dropped. $200,000. My credit report only shows about $40,000 in debt. The debt is just the funding mechanism, Mara explained, her voice sharp and precise. The credit cards were used to buy materials, lumber, copper, appliances. Those materials were likely used in Graham's flip projects or side jobs. But the revenue, the money coming into Grapevine accounts from clients. She pointed to a column of numbers. Look at these deposits. $9,000. 9,000, 500, 8,000, 800. Do you see a pattern? They are all under 10,000, I said. Exactly, Mara said. In banking compliance, any cash deposit over $10,000 triggers a currency transaction report to the IRS. It flags the account for scrutiny. Your mother and uncle were keeping the deposits just under the limit. It is called structuring. It is a classic method of money laundering. I stared at the numbers. Laundering, I asked. You mean like the cartel? I mean hiding income, Mara said. They were likely doing construction work off the books, taking cash or personal checks, depositing them into the Gray Pine your account to make it look like legitimate business revenue, and then transferring it out to themselves as consulting fees or expenses. They were washing their dirty money through your clean name. I sat back, the leather chair creaking. I had thought my mother was just a manipulative suburban mom who liked to shop. I had thought Graham was just a lazy bully. But this was sophisticated. This required planning. Diane, I said softly. Excuse me? Mara asked. It is Diane, I said. Graham is not smart enough for this. He can barely use Excel. He is the loudmouth. But my mother, she used to work in billing at a medical center 20 years ago. She knows how codes work. She knows how audits happen. Well, Mara said, closing the laptop. She is about to learn how a subpoena works. We spent the next 3 hours drafting the paperwork. We didn't go to social media. I didn't post a tearful TikTok about my family betrayal. I went to the Federal Trade Commission's website and filed an official identity theft report. I notarized an affidavit stating that I had no knowledge of the Gray Pine LLC. Then, we initiated the disputes. Mara was relentless. We called the fraud departments of Chase, American Express, and Discover. We didn't ask for forgiveness. We demanded records. My client is the victim of familial identity theft, Mara told a supervisor at Chase, her voice cutting through the phone line like a laser. We are filing a police report today. We require the IP logs for every login on this account for the last 24 months. We also require the physical shipping addresses for every replacement card sent. They might resist giving that without a court order, I whispered. They won't, Mara assured me, covering the mouthpiece. Banks hate liability more than they hate privacy violations. Once I say fraud ring, they will want to prove they weren't complicit. She was right. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the first batch of data had arrived in Mara's secure inbox. We looked at the IP logs. Every single login, hundreds of them, traced back to a single IP address. Mara ran a geolocation trace. It popped up on a map. 142 Maple Drive, Wellington Ridge, PA, my parents' house. There were also a few logins from a mobile device, an iPhone 13. That is Graham's phone, I said. He upgraded last year. He bragged about the camera. And look at the e-signatures, Mara said, pulling up a DocuSign audit trail for the $10,000 personal loan. The document showed the time and location of the signature. It was signed at 10:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. Where were you on Tuesday, April 12th, 2024? Mara asked. I checked my calendar on my phone. I was at a dentist appointment in East Briar. I have the receipt. The signature was executed from the Wellington Ridge IP address, Mara said. Unless you can teleport, you did not sign this. The evidence was piling up. It was a mountain of digital footprints, and every single one of them led directly to my mother's home office. I left Mara's office with a copy of the affidavit and strict instructions. Do not talk to them. Do not answer their calls. If they show up at your door, call the police. I drove back to East Briar. My phone was still blowing up, but I had silenced the notifications. I saw a text from Holly pop up on my car display. Holly Diane is losing it. She told Aunt Martha that you hacked her computer and planted the evidence. She is trying to say you framed her. I gripped the steering wheel. Framed her. She was the one who had spent years framing me. I decided to call Holly back. I needed to know the enemy's movement. Hey, Holly answered on the first ring. She sounded winded. I am walking the dog so I can talk. It is insane over here. Aurora. Diane is scrubbing the house. I saw her shredding papers in the kitchen sink. Let her shred, I said calmly. The banks have digital copies. She can burn the house down. It won't erase the server logs. She is telling everyone you are vindictive, Holly said. She is playing the poor mother card hard. She says she only tried to help you build a business and you turned on her. Holly, I asked, do you remember when we were kids and Diane used to brag about her old job? Yeah, Holly said. She used to say she was the only one who knew how to massage the numbers so the doctors got their bonuses. I need you to write that down, I said. I need you to write down every time she bragged about manipulating paperwork, every time she talked about how easy it was to trick the system. You are building a character profile, Holly realized. I am proving intent, I said. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mother trying to help. This was a woman who thought she was smarter than the banking system. I hung up and pulled into my parking spot. I felt heavy, drained. The adrenaline of the cold open was gone, replaced by the crushing reality of what I was doing. I was dismantling my family. I was sending my mother to prison. I walked up the stairs to my apartment. I just wanted to take a hot shower and wash the feeling of the diner off my skin. But when I got to my door, I saw a sticky note attached to the wood. It wasn't from my landlord. It wasn't from Diane. It was a generic pink message slip, the kind construction workers use. Call Mike. Urgent regarding Gray Pine invoice 402. There was a number scrawled in black marker. My heart hammered. Who was Mike? I unlocked my door, went inside, and locked it again immediately. I stared at the note. Invoice number 402. I sat down at my kitchen table and dialed the number. Yeah, Mike here, a gruff voice answered. Sounds of power tools buzzed in the background. Hi, I said, keeping my voice steady. This is Aurora Mitchell. I found a note on my door. Finally, Mike said. The tone wasn't friendly. Look, lady, I have been chasing Graham for 3 weeks, but since your name is on the checks, I figured I would come to the address on the registration. What checks? I asked. The checks for the drywall job on Elm Street, Mike said. Gray Pine Home Solutions. I did the install. Graham said the check was in the mail. It never came. Then the check he gave me last week bounced. Insufficient funds? I did not know about a drywall job, I said. Don't give me that, Mike snapped. I have the contract right here. Signed by Aurora Mitchell. I have the work order. Signed by Aurora Mitchell. I have the change order for the extra insulation. Signed by Aurora Mitchell. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sir, I said. I have never signed a contract with you. Well, someone did, he said. And if I do not get my $4,000 by Friday, I am putting a mechanic's lien on your business assets. And I know people in the union, lady. You do not want a reputation for stiffing subs in this town. I am not the one stiffing you, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I am being stiff too. I do not care about your internal drama, Mike said. I care about my money. You are the owner. You are the boss. Fix it. He hung up. I stared at the phone. You are the owner. You are the boss. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just credit card debt. It wasn't just bank loans. They had been signing contracts in my name. They had been hiring employees. They had been engaging with vendors. If Gray Pine hurt someone on a job site, I was liable. If Gray Pine committed insurance fraud, I was liable. If Gray Pine didn't pay its taxes, I was the one the IRS would come for. They hadn't just used me as a wallet. They had set me up as the CEO of a criminal enterprise without my knowledge. I looked at the stack of evidence Mara and I had compiled. It wasn't enough. We needed more. We needed to prove that I wasn't the boss. We needed to prove that I was the ghost they were hiding behind. I picked up the phone and dialed Mara back. We have a problem, I said when she answered. What is it? I just got a call from a drywall contractor. I said, he says he has my signature on 3 different contracts. Okay, Mara said, her voice tightening. That complicates things. Mara, I said, looking out the window at the gray sky of East Briar. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is racketeering. They are running a business using my identity to shield themselves from debts and lawsuits. I know, Mara said. I was going to wait to tell you this until tomorrow, but the bank called me back just as you were leaving. And the account ending in 8892, the one Sloan used. Yes. It is not just receiving transfers, Mara said. It is paying out, to an offshore betting site. I closed my eyes. Graham, I whispered. Looks like it, Mara said. Your uncle has a gambling problem, and he is using your credit and your sister's bank account to fund it. And your mother is the accountant making sure the numbers balance just enough to keep the lights on. I laughed. It was a dark, broken sound. They really did eat the whole cake, didn't they? I said. Aurora, Mara said sharply. Focus. We are going to bury them, but you need to stay offline. Do not let them know you know about the gambling. Let that be the surprise. Oh, don't worry, I said. thinking of the look on Graham's face when I whispered in his ear, "I love surprises." The war did not begin with a subpoena or a police siren. It began, as all modern family wars do, with a vague Facebook status update and a passive-aggressive Instagram story. I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by stacks of bank statements and legal pads, when the first shot was fired. My phone, which I had set to silent, lit up with a notification from Facebook. Graham Mitchell uploaded a new video. I should not have clicked it. Mara, my lawyer, had told me to stay offline, to be a ghost. But curiosity is a physical itch, and I scratched it. I opened the app. The video had been filmed in the front seat of Graham's truck. The angle was unflattering, looking up his nose, catching the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was wearing sunglasses, even though it was clearly overcast. He looked like every other middle-aged man who decides to air his grievances to a webcam because his therapist won't listen anymore. "You know what is funny?" Graham started, his voice loud and distorted by the wind hitting the microphone. "What is funny is when you help people, you bend over backwards, you give them opportunities, you let them put their name on big projects, and how do they repay you? Jealousy." He paused to sniff aggressively. "Some people," he continued, pointing a shaking finger at the lens, "are just bitter because they do not have the hustle. They see someone building an empire, and they want to tear it down. They call it rules. I call it weakness. Beware of the snakes in your own garden. Folks, especially the ones you fed." The caption read, "Sad when family turns on you for a paycheck. Hustle loyalty fake." I stared at the screen. He did not name me. He did not have to. The comment section was already filling up with sympathy from his golf buddies and random real estate acquaintances. Ignore the haters. Graham, keep grinding. Brother, family can be the worst sometimes. I felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rise in my throat. He was spinning a narrative where he was the victim. He, the man who had gambled away thousands of dollars using my credit score, was the martyr of the story. Then came Sloane. My sister was far more subtle than Graham. She understood aesthetics. She understood that if you want to destroy someone online, you do it with a sepia filter and an inspirational quote. I switched to Instagram. There it was, at the top of my feed. It was a photo from 10 years ago, a family picnic. We were all there. Mom, Dad, Graham, Sloane, and me. But Sloane had cropped the image, the square frame centered perfectly on her, Mom, and Graham laughing at something. Dad was a blur in the background, and I was gone. I had been standing on the far left in the original photo. I remembered that day. I was wearing a blue dress, in Sloane's version. My arm was just a disembodied sliver on the edge of the frame, easily missed. The caption was a quote in elegant, italicized font. "Blood is thicker than water, but sometimes you have to prune the dead branches to let the tree grow. Holding on to my real ones today. Love you. Mama, prune the dead branches." I was the dead branch. I was the rot that needed to be cut away so the Mitchell family tree could flourish. The audacity was breathtaking. She was posting about loyalty while driving an Audi paid for by the dead branch. She was talking about pruning the tree while she was actively poisoning the roots. I put the phone down on the table. My hands were trembling, not with fear, but with a cold, sharp rage. They were rewriting history in real time. They were rallying the troops, painting me as the villain before I had even officially filed the lawsuit. Then, the group chat exploded. The Mitchell family fun chat was usually a graveyard of birthday wishes and holiday emojis, but today, it was a battlefield. It started with Aunt Martha. She was my mother's older sister, a woman who lived 2 towns over and mostly communicated in capital letters and minion memes. Aunt Martha. Diane. What is going on? I saw Graham's video. Is everyone okay? Cousin Ben, yeah. I saw it too. Who is the snake, Diane? Everyone. Please calm down. It is just a misunderstanding. We are handling it internally. Graham. It is not a misunderstanding. Di. It is sabotage. I have contractors calling me because someone is spreading lies about our liquidity. Diane. Graham. Stop typing. Now. Graham. No. I am tired of being the bad guy. I built this business. I carried this family. I watched the messages roll in. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Graham was panicked. He was losing control of the narrative, and his instinct was to scream louder. Then, Holly entered the chat. Holly carried the family. Is that what we are calling identity theft now? The chat went silent for a full minute. I could imagine the collective gasp echoing through 5 different households. Diane. Holly. Stay out of this. You do not know the full story. Holly. I know enough. I know Aurora has a credit report that looks like a crime scene. Sloan Holly, you are just jealous too. You always take her side because you guys are both struggling. Holly. Better to struggle with my own money than shine with someone else's stolen cash. Sloan, why are you guys so scared of an investigation if you did nothing wrong? That was the question. The golden question. Why be afraid if you are innocent? Graham, I am not scared. Let them investigate. My books are clean, Holly. Then why did you throw up in the bathroom at Copper Ash? Diane, enough. This is a family matter. It does not belong in the group chat. Everyone stop posting immediately. I sat there, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to type. I wanted to scream. I wanted to upload the PDF of the forged loan application and say, "Here is your hustle, Graham." But I didn't. Mara's voice was in my head. Do not engage. Let them dig their own graves. Every text they send is admissible evidence. So I stayed silent. I let my silence be the loudest thing in the room. But then, a notification popped up from a name I hadn't seen in the chat in years. Aunt Janine. Janine was a distant cousin on my father's side. Someone who usually only posted about her cats. Aunt Janine. Wait, are we talking about the help Diane asks for? The typing bubbles appeared from Diane instantly. She was trying to intercept. Diane Janine. Call me, Aunt Janine. Because 5 years ago, Diane asked to use my info for a utility bill at a rental property. She said her credit was temporarily frozen because of a dispute. I gave it to her. Should I be worried? My heart stopped. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the special victim. I wasn't the only target. My mother was a serial offender. She had done this before. She had tested the waters with Janine, a distant relative who was too polite to ask questions, before she moved on to the main course, her own daughter. Diane Janine. Call me now. Holly. Don't call her. Janine, check your credit report. Aunt Janine. Oh my God. I have a collection agency calling me for a cable bill in Wellington Ridge from 2020. I thought it was a scam. Graham. It was a mistake. A clerical error, Holly. A clerical error that lasted 5 years. The chat was in freefall. The facade of the respectable Mitchell family was crumbling pixel by pixel. My mother wasn't the benevolent matriarch anymore. She was a predator who had been feeding on her own kin. I took screenshots. I captured everything. Janine's admission, Diane's panic, Graham's defensive lies. I forwarded them all to Mara immediately. Subject new witness. Body. It looks like I am not the only one. Aunt Janine just admitted Diane used her SSN 5 years ago. I could almost hear Mara smiling from her office downtown. This established a pattern of behavior. It proved intent. It proved that this wasn't a family mistake, but a calculated modus operandi. Back in the chat, Diane was spiraling. Diane, you are all being ridiculous. I have helped every single one of you. I organized the reunions. I bought the gifts. I held this family together, and this is the thanks I get. A witch hunt. Sloan. It is disgusting. Mom is literally crying right now. You guys are heartless. Holly, we are not the ones who stole Aurora's identity. Sloan, no one stole anything. It was a loan, Holly. A loan requires permission. Did she give it? Sloan didn't answer. She couldn't answer, because she knew the answer was no. I was about to close the app, satisfied with the carnage, when a new message appeared. Ray Mitchell, my father. He had been in the chat for years, but I could count on one hand the number of times he had posted. Usually, it was just happy birthday, or okay. He was a man of few words, a man who had spent his life making himself small to fit in the corners of Diane's ambition. But yesterday, he had bought me coffee. Yesterday, he had looked at the evidence. Ray Mitchell. Stop it, all of you. The text bubble hung there, stark and commanding. Ray Mitchell. Do not call my daughter a saboteur. Do not call her jealous, and do not dare call her ungrateful. I held my breath. Ray Mitchell. I have seen the papers. I have seen the signatures. Aurora did not sign them. Someone else did, and that someone is in this chat. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a room where the lights had suddenly been turned on, revealing the cockroaches scattering for cover. Ray Mitchell. Stop gaslighting her. Stop lying to the family. If you took the money, own it. But do not blame the girl whose life you used as collateral. I read the message 3 times, my eyes blurred with tears. For 29 years, I had waited for him to stand up. I had waited for him to step between me and the firing squad. And finally, here, in a digital chat room, he had done it. He hadn't just defended me. He had validated me. She was holding herself hostage, threatening her own health, threatening Graham's life, trying to make me buckle under the weight of guilt. If I die, it is on you. A year ago. That text would have broken me. I would have called her, sobbing, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. I would have offered to pay the debt myself just to make her stop hurting. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was the person who had blown out the candle on a half-eaten cake. I looked at the message. I looked at the manipulation. So naked and desperate. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared for Graham. She was scared of losing control. I typed my reply. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue about her health. I thought about all the lectures she had given me over the years. All the times she had sat me down and told me that I needed to be more responsible. That I needed to take ownership of my life. That I needed to face the consequences of my choices. Aurora. You taught me that actions have consequences. Mom. You taught me to take responsibility for my name. I am just doing what you raised me to do. I hit send. Then, I did something I should have done a long time ago. Block contact. I blocked her. I blocked Graham. I blocked Sloan. I left the group chat. I put the phone down on the coffee table. The silence in the apartment was profound. It wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence of peace. I picked up my laptop and opened the email from Mara. Subject case update. We have the bank records. The structuring is clear. We also have a statement from the notary who supposedly witnessed your signature on the loan docs. She admits she never saw you. Graham paid her $50 to stamp it. This is fraud. Aurora, we are ready to file. I typed a single word in response. Proceed. The social media war was over. The family chat war was over. Now, the real war began. And unlike them, I wasn't fighting for likes. I was fighting for my life. The text message from my mother arrived 2 days after the group chat implosion. It was surprisingly brief, stripped of the usual emojis and passive-aggressive punctuation. We need to talk. Not on the phone. Face to face. Come to the house tonight. It was a summons. She wanted me on her turf. In the kitchen where she had fed me. In the living room where she had hung my childhood photos. In the house that smelled of her perfume and my father's resignation. She wanted the home court advantage, where she could use nostalgia and guilt as weapons. She wanted to cry in a setting that demanded I comfort her. I replied 10 minutes later, I am not coming to the house. If you want to talk, meet me at the Pine Bridge Center. Conference room B, 2 o'clock tomorrow. If you're not there, I file the police report at 3. Pine Bridge Center was a sterile, corporate office complex halfway between East Briar and Wellington Ridge. It was neutral ground. It had fluorescent lighting, gray carpets, and walls that did not hold memories. It was a place for business, and that was exactly what this was. They arrived 10 minutes late, a power move. I was already seated at the long mahogany table, my back to the window. To my right sat Mara Benton, my attorney, looking like a shark in a tailored navy suit. To my left sat a man they had never met, Mr. David Vance, a senior fraud investigator from the regional bank that held the Grey Pine accounts. When the door opened, the air in the room shifted from cool to suffocating. Diane walked in first. She was wearing a soft, oversized cardigan and no makeup, a calculated choice. She was playing the role of the frail, aging mother. She wanted to look tired. She wanted to look harmless. Uncle Graham followed her. He looked terrible. His skin was the color of old dough, and he was sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. He was wearing a suit that looked like he had slept in it. And trailing behind them was Sloan. She was dressed for work in a pencil skirt and blouse, checking her watch, radiating an air of, I am too important for this. She wouldn't look at me. Aurora, Diane said, stopping short when she saw the other people in the room. Her eyes narrowed, the frail mother mask slipping for a fraction of a second. I thought this was a family meeting, private. It is a meeting about family business, I said, my voice flat. Sit down. Who are these people? Graham demanded, his voice cracking. He pointed a shaking finger at Mara. Is that a lawyer? You brought a lawyer to talk to your mother. I am Mara Benton, my attorney said, not rising from her chair. I am representing Ms. Mitchell in the matter of the identity theft and fraud committed against her. And this, she gestured to the man on my left, is Mr. Vance. He is from the fraud division of First National Bank. The color drained from Graham's face so fast I thought he might faint. He knew who First National was. That was where the Grey Pine account lived. That was where the money had been washed. A fraud investigator, Diane scoffed, trying to regain control. She pulled out a chair and sat down, smoothing her cardigan. Don't be ridiculous. This is a misunderstanding. We are here to clear the air, not to be interrogated like criminals. Sit down, Graham, Sloan, I said. They sat. The table was wide, a physical barrier between the two sides of my life. On one side, the truth. On the other, the lie. Here is how this is going to work, I said. I am not here to argue. I am not here to hear about how much you love me or how hard you tried. I am here to present the facts. And then, I am going to give you a choice. You are being so cold, Sloan muttered, finally looking at me with eyes full of resentment. You are treating Mom like she is an enemy. She is the enemy of my credit score. Sloan, I said, and my future. I nodded to Mara. Mara opened a thick binder. The sound of the heavy cover hitting the table echoed in the silence. We have compiled a forensic timeline of the financial activity associated with the entity known as Gray Pine Home Solutions, as well as the personal credit lines opened in Aurora Mitchell's name. Mara began. Her voice was professional, devoid of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a map. This is a geolocation map of every login to the Gray Pine banking portal over the last 18 months. Mara said, Mr. Vance provided the raw data. Diane looked at the paper, then looked away. I do not understand technical things. It is quite simple, Mrs. Mitchell, Vance spoke up. His voice was deep, gravelly, the voice of a man who had spent 20 years catching people who thought they were smart. Every time you log into a bank account, your computer leaves a fingerprint, an IP address. We tracked 1,800 logins. 98% of them came from a residential IP address registered to Ray and Diane Mitchell at 142 Maple Drive. So, Graham blustered, Aurora comes over all the time. She probably used our Wi-Fi to do her business. Mara slid another paper across. These are the logins for the electronic signatures on the loan documents, she said. 3 of them were executed at times when Aurora Mitchell was verifiably elsewhere. One was signed while she was at a dental appointment, another while she was meeting a client in East Briar, and this one, she pointed to a timestamp, was signed on February 14th at 9 p.m. Valentine's Day, Sloan said, confused. Aurora was on a date, Mara said. I have the affidavit from her boyfriend at the time, but you, Graham, you were home alone, weren't you? We have your Uber Eats receipt delivered to Maple Drive at exactly 9:15. Graham's mouth opened and closed like a fish. This is entrapment, Diane shouted, slamming her hand on the table. You are stalking us. You have no right to look at our dinner receipts. We have every right when you are using my client's name to commit federal crimes, Mara said calmly. It is not a crime if she allowed it. Diane screamed. She stood up, her face flushing red. She knew. We talked about it. She said, Mom, do whatever you need to do to fix the house up. She gave me permission. Verbal contracts are binding. Mara looked at her over the rim of her glasses. A verbal contract for a $50,000 loan? Mara asked. In the state of Pennsylvania, absolutely not. But even if it were, where's the proof of this conversation? Did she confirm it in a text? An email? A voicemail? It was at dinner, Diane insisted, waving her hands. We were eating. Families don't record their dinners. But you do record the finances, Vance interrupted. He pulled a file from his briefcase. Mrs. Mitchell, I have been looking at the transaction history of Gray Pine. Do you know what structuring is? Diane went silent. Her eyes darted to the door. It is when you break up large cash deposits to avoid federal reporting limits, Vance explained. It is illegal. It is a felony, and Gray Pine has done it 22 times in the last year. He slid a spreadsheet across the table. And then there are the outflows. Vance continued. Payments to online casinos based in Malta. Payments to a luxury car dealership. Payments to a travel agency for a trip to the Maldives. Sloan made a small, strangled noise. She shrank in her chair. This isn't a business, Vance said, looking directly at Graham. It is a slush fund. You were taking cash from under-the-table construction jobs, depositing it into an account in your niece's name to hide it from the IRS, and then spending it on gambling and lifestyle assets. That is money laundering. Plain and simple. The words hung in the air. Money laundering. Graham had his head in his hands. He was shaking violently now. I didn't mean to, Graham whispered into his palms. I was going to pay it back. I had a system. I had a run of bad luck. You gambled with my name, I said. You bet my life on a blackjack hand. We are family, Diane pleaded, switching tactics instantly. Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. I pulled it back. Aurora, baby, please, you are blowing this out of proportion. We can fix this. We can pay it off slowly. But if you pursue this, if you let this man file a report, you are sending your brother to jail. You are sending me to jail. You sent yourself to jail. Mom, I said. When you forged my signature, I did it for us, she sobbed. To keep the family afloat. Your father doesn't make enough. Graham needed help. What was I supposed to do? Let us starve. You didn't starve, I said coldly. You bought a boat. You bought Sloan a car. Sloan needed a safe car, Diane yelled. She drives on the highway. And I drive a 10-year-old death trap, I countered. But I guess my safety doesn't count. Sloan is different, Diane snapped. She has a real job. She has a reputation to uphold. And there it was. The truth, finally spoken aloud. Sloan mattered. I didn't. Sloan was staring at the table, her face pale. She was twisting her engagement ring around her finger, over and over. I can't be involved in this, Sloan whispered. Mark is up for a promotion. If his company finds out my family is involved in fraud, if they audit me, they will audit you, Sloan, Mara said, because you received $8,000 of stolen funds for your down payment. I didn't know, Sloan shrieked, looking at me. I swear, Aurora, I didn't know it was stolen. Mom said it was inheritance. She lied, Graham shouted, suddenly looking up. He wasn't going to go down alone. Diane told Sloan the money came from the business she knew. I did not, Sloan yelled back. Stop it, Diane screamed. Stop fighting. I watched them. They were eating each other. The united front had lasted less than 10 minutes. Sloan, I said quietly, look at me. She looked up. Her eyes were terrified. She looked like a little girl who had broken a vase. Did you know the money came from Grapevine? I asked. She hesitated. She looked at Diane, who was shaking her head subtly. Then she looked at the bank investigator, who was writing something in his notebook. Self-preservation kicked in. Mom said, Sloane's voice trembled. Mom said she was using your credit because yours was available. She said we were just borrowing it. She said we would pay it back before you ever noticed. The room went dead silent. Sloan covered her mouth. Realizing what she had just said, Diane closed her eyes, defeated. Borrowing it, Mara repeated. So you admit that there was a conscious conversation about using Aurora's credit without her explicit knowledge. You admit that the plan was to hide it from her. No, I meant, Sloan stammered, tears streaming down her face. I meant Mom said Aurora wouldn't mind. She said Aurora doesn't use her credit anyway. I just heard a confession, Vance said, tapping his pen on the table. She admitted to knowledge of the scheme. She admitted to conspiracy. I didn't mean that, Sloan cried. I just wanted the car. Mom said it was fine. You just admitted you knew, I said. My voice was calm, final. You knew I was the source, and you took the money anyway, and then you posted photos of the car and mocked me for being poor. Sloan put her head on the table and sobbed. It was a chaotic, ugly sound. Diane stared at me. Her face had hardened again. The tears were gone. She realized the frail mother act hadn't worked. She realized the verbal contract lie hadn't worked. She was out of moves. What do you want, Aurora? She asked. Her voice was ice cold. You want to see us in handcuffs? Is that it? You want to see your mother in an orange jumpsuit? Will that make you feel big? Will that finally make you feel successful? I don't care about feeling successful, I said. I care about being free. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I placed it on the table in front of Diane. This is a confession of judgment, I said, and a settlement agreement. Diane looked at it like it was a bomb. What is this? Graham asked. Option A, I said. You sign this? All of you. It states that you, Diane and Graham, accept full liability for the Grapevine debt. It states that the credit cards were opened fraudulently by you. It states that Sloan will repay the $8,000 immediately. And if we sign? Diane asked. If you sign, I take this document to the creditors. They will transfer the debt to your names. They will remove the inquiries from my report. I will not press criminal charges. Mr. Vance here will close the fraud investigation on the bank's end, provided the accounts are closed and the negative balance is paid within 30 days. Vance nodded. It is a generous offer. The bank prefers repayment to prosecution. It is cheaper for us. And option B, Graham asked, his voice shaking. Option B, I said, leaning forward. You walk out of this room without signing, Mr. Vance files his report with the FBI and the IRS this afternoon. Mara files a civil suit for damages, emotional distress, and racketeering. I hand over the IP logs to the district attorney. I looked at Sloan. And Mark finds out his fiancé is a co-conspirator in a federal fraud case. Sloan lifted her head. Her mascara was running down her face. I will sign, she whispered. Give me the pen. Sloan, Diane hissed. Do not be stupid. If we sign this, we are admitting guilt. They can still use it against us. This document has a non-prosecution clause from my client, Mara interjected. Aurora is agreeing not to press charges if the terms are met. It is your only life raft. Mrs. Mitchell, the water is rising fast. Graham looked at the investigator. He looked at the thick file of evidence. He looked at the fear in Sloane's eyes. He reached for the pen. I can't go to jail. He muttered. I can't do time. I have blood pressure issues. He grabbed the document and scribbled his signature on the line. Graham, Diane shouted, betrayed. Sign it, Mom, Sloane said, her voice vicious. Just sign it. You did this. You fixed the books. You said you could handle it. Well, handle it. Diane looked around the table. She was alone. Her allies had crumbled. Her victims had armed themselves. She looked at me. There was no love in her eyes, only a deep, simmering resentment. She hated me not because I had done something wrong, but because I had stopped letting her do something wrong to me. You are destroying this family. She spat at me. No, Mom, I said. I am saving myself from it. She grabbed the pen. She signed her name with such force the tip tore through the paper. She shoved the folder back at me. Are you happy? She asked again. I picked up the folder. I checked the signatures. Diane, Graham, Sloane. It was done. The debt was theirs. The shame was theirs. I stood up. I am not happy, I said. I am solvent. I turned to Mara and Vance. Let's go. We walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I heard Sloane sobbing again. I heard Graham asking if he could have a glass of water. I heard Diane's silence, which was louder than any scream. We walked into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind us. The air in the hallway was cool and clean. That went well, Mara said, tucking the file under her arm. I will have the freezing orders filed by 5 o'clock. Your credit report should show the dispute flags by Monday. Thank you, Mara, I said. And thank you, Mr. Vance. Just doing my job. Ms. Mitchell, Vance said. You have a tough skin. Most people fold in that room. I had practice, I said. I had 29 years of practice. I walked out of the Pine Bridge Center and into the afternoon sun. It was blindingly bright. I took a deep breath. I checked my phone. One new message. It was from my father. Did they sign? I typed back one word. Yes. It was over. The legal war was won. But as I drove back to my apartment, I knew the story wasn't quite finished. There was one last loose end, one last twist of the knife, because while I had cleared my name, the fallout was just beginning to rain down on them, and I intended to watch every drop fall. The ink on the settlement agreement was barely dry, but the atmosphere in the conference room at Pine Bridge Center had shifted from tense to funereal. The air conditioner hummed, a mechanical drone that seemed to mock the silence of my family. My mother, Diane, was the last to let go of the pen. She stared at her signature as if she could burn it off the page with the sheer force of her regret. But it was not regret for what she had done to me. It was regret that she had been caught. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, rimmed with the exhaustion of a woman who had spent a lifetime juggling lies. I did this for the family. Aurora, she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of martyrdom and rage. You do not understand the pressure. I did it because you were weak. You were struggling. You could not get credit on your own. So I built it for you. I was trying to create a safety net, and you just cut the ropes. I stood there, clutching the folder that contained my freedom. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes and then tied an anchor around my ankle. You did not do it because I was weak. Mom, I said. My voice was steady, vibrating with a clarity I had never felt before. You did it because you thought I was too afraid to fight back. You thought I would just take the half-eaten cake and say thank you. You mistook my silence for permission. Diane flinched. She opened her mouth to argue, to spin another web of gaslighting, but Graham placed a heavy hand on her arm. Let it go. Graham mumbled. He looked defeated, a deflated balloon of a man. It is over. It was over. But the consequences were just beginning. Mr. Vance, the bank investigator, wasted no time. He pulled out his phone before he even left the room. I heard him making the call as he walked down the hallway. This is Vance. Authorization code Delta 94. Freeze the Grey Pine accounts immediately. Flag all associated personal accounts for suspicious activity. Yes. Initiate the clawback protocols. I watched Graham's face as he heard those words. He slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The Grey Pine account, his piggy bank, his gambling fund. His illusion of success was gone. In a matter of seconds, he had gone from a business owner to a man with zero assets and a confession of judgment hanging over his head like a guillotine. We left them there in that gray room. I did not say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. The fallout was swift, brutal, and deeply satisfying. 2 days later, the news about Sloan dropped. It didn't come from a family group chat or a tearful phone call. It came from the grapevine of Wellington Ridge, a small town where secrets rot quickly in the sun. Sloan had been summoned by human resources at her company. Apparently, corporate compliance departments do not look kindly on their senior vice presidents of sales being named as co-conspirators in bank fraud investigations. The $8,000 down payment for her Audi, the money she had claimed was a bonus or inheritance, had been flagged during a routine background check for her new promotion. When the bank froze the Grey Pine accounts, it triggered an alert on every transfer that had ever left that ledger. The promotion was rescinded before the celebratory balloons had even deflated. She was placed on administrative leave pending an internal audit. The Audi Q5, the symbol of her golden child status, was voluntarily surrendered to the dealership to liquidate equity for the repayment plan. Sloan had lost her job title, her car, and her superiority complex in the span of 48 hours. She was no longer the successful sister, she was just another liability. And then there was Diane, to satisfy the terms of the settlement and avoid criminal prosecution. The debt had to be paid. $40,000 was not a small sum, and thanks to Graham's gambling, the cash was gone. Diane had to bleed for it. I heard from Holly that a for sale sign had gone up on the small boat my father had bought for retirement. Then, the designer handbags started appearing on resale sites. The diamond earrings my father had given her for their 30th anniversary were sold to a jeweler in the city. She was selling the props of her performance. Without the jewelry, without the boat, without the ability to treat the family to expensive dinners at Copper Ash, Diane was losing the only thing that mattered to her, her audience. She was stripping herself of the halo she lived in, piece by piece, to pay for the sins she had committed in the dark. My own recovery was less dramatic, but infinitely more rewarding. A week after the showdown, I sat in the office of a credit repair specialist Mara had recommended. My father, Ray, sat next to me. The room was quiet, filled only with the scratching of a pen. I was signing the final affidavits to dispute the fraudulent accounts. One by one, the weights were being lifted, the chase card, the Amex, the personal loan. This will take about 30 to 60 days to fully clear, the specialist told me, but with the confession of judgment you secured, it is a slam dunk. Your score should rebound to the mid-700s by the end of the year. I put the pen down. My hand was cramping, but it was a good pain. It was the pain of rebuilding. We walked out to the parking lot. The autumn air was crisp, smelling of dry leaves and rain. My father stopped by my car. He looked at his shoes, then at the sky, and finally at me. He looked smaller than I remembered, but for the first time, he looked real. I am going to stay in the guest room for a while longer, he said. Maybe look for an apartment in town. Your mother and I there is too much silence in that house now. I understand, Dad, I said. He reached out and awkwardly patted my shoulder. It was a stiff gesture, but it was the most physical affection he had shown me in years. I am sorry, Aurora, he said, his voice thick. Not just for the money, but for the silence. I saw things. I suspected things, and I let myself be blind because I did not want the fight. I let you take the hits because I was too coward to take them myself. You are here now, I said. That counts. It shouldn't have taken this long, he whispered. You had to save yourself. Parents are supposed to do that. He got into his truck and drove away. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of closure. He wasn't the hero of the story. There were no heroes in this family, but he was no longer the villain's accomplice. Later that evening, Holly came over to my apartment. She brought a bottle of cheap wine and a bag of takeout that we ate on the floor of my living room. So, Holly said, waving a dumpling on a fork, the neighborhood is talking. Apparently, Diane told the book club she is downsizing for a simpler life. She is spinning it as a spiritual journey. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, deep and belly-shaking. Of course she is. She would spin a plane crash as a surprise landing. They are terrified of you. You know, Holly said, her expression turning serious. I saw Graham at the gas station. He literally hid behind a display of beef jerky until I left. They are not afraid because they hurt you, Aurora. They are afraid because you actually used the system they thought they owned. They were never afraid of hurting me, I said, taking a sip of wine. They thought I was durable. They thought I was the designated punching bag. They are only afraid now because the punching bag hit back. They fear the law more than they fear breaking your heart, Holly summarized. That is the saddest part. It is, I agreed, but at least the law has teeth. My phone chimed on the coffee table, a notification from Credit Karma. I picked it up. My heart did a little flutter, not of panic, but of anticipation. Dispute update. The account, Gray Pine Home Solutions, has been removed from your report. Your score has increased by 120 points. I stared at the number. It was just a number. Pixels on a screen. But it represented my name. It represented my ability to rent an apartment, to buy a car, to exist in the world without shame. It is gone, I whispered, showing the screen to Holly. The LLC is gone. Holly raised her glass. To Gray Pine, she said. May it rot in hell. To hell, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. Just then, the buzzer to my apartment rang. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the intercom. Delivery, a voice crackled. I buzzed them in. A minute later, a delivery driver handed me a white bakery box tied with a simple string. Who is it from? I asked. No name, the driver said. Just an address. I carried the box into the kitchen. Holly followed me, curious. I placed it on the counter. It was heavy. I untied the string and lifted the lid. Inside sat a cake. It wasn't a fancy cake from a high-end bakery. It looked homemade. The frosting was chocolate, thick and swirled by hand. It was a whole cake, a perfect, round, untouched circle of chocolate. There was a card tucked into the side. I pulled it out. The handwriting was messy, scrawled in blue ink. I recognized it immediately. It was my father's handwriting. The note was short, just 5 words. You were never the joke. I felt a lump form in my throat. Hot and tight. I looked at the cake. It wasn't about the sugar or the flour. It was about the wholeness of it. For 29 years, I had accepted the scraps. I had accepted the half-eaten gestures, the backhanded compliments, the love that came with conditions and credit limits. I had let them carve pieces out of me until I felt like I was barely there. But looking at this cake, I realized something. I wasn't the one who was empty. They had tried to fill their own hollowness by consuming me, but they had failed. I opened the drawer and pulled out a knife, a big, sharp chef's knife. What are you doing? Holly asked, smiling. I am cutting the cake, I said. I positioned the knife over the center. I didn't wait for a song. I didn't wait for a wish. I didn't wait for permission. I pressed down. The knife sliced through the frosting and the sponge with a satisfying, soft sound. I cut a massive wedge, a piece that was too big for one person, a piece that was indulgent and unapologetic. I put it on a plate and took a fork. I took a bite. It was sweet, rich, and it tasted like victory. The cake on my birthday had been half gone, but this one was all mine, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone else to take the first bite. I was done letting people eat my life for me. I swallowed, looked at Holly, and grinned. Want a slice? I asked. There is plenty. Hell yes, she said. We ate the cake in the kitchen of my drafty apartment, laughing until our sides hurt, while 30 miles away, in a big house on Maple Drive, the lights were off, the bank accounts were frozen, and the silence was finally, blissfully, complete. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your country or city, and let me know what you would have done if you were in my shoes. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to know that it is never too late to take back your life.